I'm standing in the lobby, holding a brown cardboard box that still smells like printer ink and broken promises. The security guard who used to greet me with a smile every morning won't even look me in the eye. My key card? Dead. My nameplate? Gone. It took them less than 6 minutes to erase 17 years of my life. I should have said something, should have cursed, thrown the box at the glass wall, but I didn't. I just stood there, stunned, like my brain hadn't caught up yet with what just happened. They didn't even let me pack my things alone. Some intern stood over me like I might suddenly grab a hard drive and sprint out the door. I left behind framed photos of my kids, books I never got around to reading, even the mug that said ridiculously brilliant, a gift from our first intern class back when we were still hungry nobodies. That mug survived every late-night strategy session, every setback, every breakthrough, but apparently it didn't survive Sophia Langford. The last time I saw her, she was smirking behind the glass wall of her father's office, arms folded, wearing the same smug look I'd seen the day she first shadowed me, like she already thought she was smarter than everyone in the room. I still hear his voice in my head, the CEO, Gregory Langford. He used to call me his right hand. Used to. That morning he didn't even stand when I walked in. He just leaned back in his chair and said, "It's not personal, Ethan. We're going in a new direction." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because that's what people say when they're stabbing you in the back and don't want to feel bad about it. I asked him flat out, "You mean your daughter is the new direction?" He didn't answer, just looked down at his desk, like he couldn't even face me. It's wild. I still remember the day we built this company, from scratch. We started in a converted janitor's closet on 7th and Main. No windows. One power outlet. I brought my own coffee maker. He brought nothing but a logo design scribbled on a napkin. Back then we had no budget, no name, no respect. But I had the grind. I was 27, newly married, hungry. I coded the back end myself, did customer support on weekends, built pitch decks at 2 a.m., while Gregory flew to conferences, gave TED Talks, and took meetings I earned for him. And when we got funding, I kept building, while he kept delegating. 17 years, through acquisitions, layoffs, booms, crashes. When Gregory had his health scare in year 6, I ran the entire company for 8 months. He called me the backbone, said I had his full trust, until trust had a prettier name, Sophia. She was just a kid when I met her, 12 years old, used to ask me questions about business, used to admire me. Then she went to Harvard, came back with heels sharper than her ethics, and within 2 years she was Senior Strategic Operations Officer, which in real words means my replacement was already in the building. I trained her myself. I gave her access. I gave her power. I watched it all happen, and still convinced myself she wasn't after my job. I was wrong. Now here I am, box in hand, standing where interns stand when they've been fired for stealing pens. Except I gave them 17 years. I made this company into a $288 million juggernaut, and now I'm the one being escorted out like a thief. You want to know what hurts most? It's not the betrayal, not the silence from Gregory, not even the smirk from Sophia. It's the fact that I didn't see it coming, because I believed I was family. Well, if they want to play like this, let's play. He thinks it's over, but it's just the start. You don't really feel a fall when it's slow. You only feel the ground when you hit it. 17 years ago, I was a broke software engineer with a second-hand laptop and dreams I couldn't afford. Rachel and I lived in a one-bedroom walk-up that rattled every time the neighbor sneezed. She was working nights as a nurse. I was freelancing between contracts, building apps no one downloaded, pretending it was just a phase. I was 27, hungry, tired, hopeful. And then Gregory Langford walked into my life. Back then, he wasn't Gregory the CEO. He was just Greg, the guy who found me through a LinkedIn post and asked if I could build a basic CRM in 2 weeks. Did it in 9 days. He asked if I wanted to be his co-founder, said he couldn't pay much at first, but if we built something big, it would be ours. I remember telling Rachel that night. She was heating up leftover spaghetti, still in her scrubs. She looked at me, quiet for a second, then said, "Just make sure your name stays on what you build, Ethan, and don't trust him blindly." I laughed her off. I thought she was being overly cautious. Greg seemed different. He'd bring me coffee every morning. We'd brainstorm late into the night in that tiny office. No AC, wires dangling from the ceiling. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. For a while, it felt like we were building something together. We even came up with the name Landtech during a midnight pizza run. He said I was the brain, he'd be the face, and that worked, until the face wanted all the credit. I worked 14-hour days back then, sometimes more. I remember finishing code at 3 a.m., then waking up at 6 to pitch to clients across time zones. I built the product. I built the back end. I built the trust. Greg built the image. As we grew, the team expanded. That's when I met Derek Monroe, HR head. Derek had a dry sense of humor, loved paperwork, hated risk. We got along. Sort of. He always knew which side his bread was buttered on. I used to joke that Derek would file HR forms during a nuclear war just to stay compliant. Then there was Marla Jennings, our COO, sharp, calculated, brilliant. She was the only one who could hold her own in a room full of men twice her age, including Greg. But she never challenged him directly. I always wondered why. Looking back, I think she knew where the power really sat. And it wasn't with me. There was this moment, I'll never forget it. Corporate retreat in Aspen, 10 years ago. Everyone was a little drunk. Gregory raised a glass and said, "To Ethan, the brains of the operation." Then he laughed and added, "But let's not forget who wears the crown." Marla looked away. Derek laughed too quickly. I brushed it off, thought it was just banter. But Rachel didn't. She pulled me aside that night. I still remember the way she looked at me, serious, quiet. She said, "That man's grooming his daughter, Ethan. Don't pretend you don't see it." I did see it, but I didn't want to. Back then, Sophia was still in college. She'd visit sometimes, sit in on meetings, ask questions. I thought it was sweet. Thought maybe she wanted to learn. Rachel wasn't fooled. Years passed. We expanded to 3 cities. Revenue tripled. We secured Series B. Then CI turned down offers from Google, Meta, even Amazon, because I believed in what we were building, because I believed in Gregory. And then, a year ago, Sophia started showing up again, but this time not as a curious observer. Suddenly she was consulting on strategy, then leading special projects, then promoted to senior strategic operations. No field experience. No real time in the trenches. But she had Gregory's name, and that apparently was enough. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, because Gregory asked me to, because loyalty meant everything to me. I took her under my wing. Showed her our sales funnel, our investor playbook, even our long-term roadmap. I thought, if I train her right, she could be a powerful ally. But in hindsight, I wasn't training an ally. I was handing her the keys to my execution. The pieces were already moving. I just didn't know I was the pawn. That's the thing about betrayal. It never comes from your enemies. It comes from the people you once trusted, the ones who sat beside you during your hardest days, and smile while they cut the parachute. It started with a mistake. Not mine. Marla's. She CC'd me on an internal memo she clearly meant to keep private, something labeled succession shift strategy. At first I thought it was a draft, some planning doc for executive transitions down the line. But then I read the details. It wasn't about retirement. It wasn't about 5 years from now, it was about me. The wording was slick, vague enough to hide behind legal shields, but sharp if you knew what to look for. Internal replacement transition set to begin Q3. Preparatory phase for full leadership. Handover to SL underway. All legacy infrastructure will be reassigned. SL Sophia Langford. I read it 3 times. Just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating, I wasn't supposed to see it. That much was obvious. But they'd written me out, in past tense, while I was still showing up at 6:30 every morning, still answering investor calls, still carrying the vision like it was tattooed across my chest. I felt my stomach twist. I walked straight to Gregory's office, didn't knock. He looked up from his laptop, unfazed. The same way you might glance at someone who forgot to refill the coffee pot. I dropped the printout on his desk. Tell me this isn't what it looks like. He barely glanced at it, then leaned back in his chair, exhaled slow, and said, "You're overreacting." Overreacting. That word hit harder than a slap. Before I could speak, I heard the click of heels on marble. Sophia walked in like she owned the room. Maybe she already did. She didn't even sit, just looked at me and smiled. That polite, rehearsed smile I'd come to hate. "You seem tired, Ethan," she said, head tilted slightly. "Maybe it's time you took a vacation." A vacation, that's what they called being erased now. Gregory folded his hands like a man trying to look noble in front of a firing squad. "Look," he said, "this isn't personal. We're evolving. New energy, new leadership, you've laid the foundation. Now it's time to let others build on it." I couldn't believe it. He was actually saying it like he was doing me a favor. "Foundation?" I said, barely keeping my voice steady. "I am the foundation." But I knew right then I was outnumbered and already outmaneuvered. They didn't need my permission, just my silence. The next day I noticed Victor Hahn, the tech lead I mentored fresh out of MIT, had stopped copying me in on sprint reports. He used to call me boss. Now he just nodded in meetings and ran his updates directly to Sophia. Linda Cho from legal, who'd once called me the most principled exec I've ever worked with, suddenly had her laptop shut during every meeting I attended. And she stopped speaking when I entered the room. Then came Travis, Gregory's son. The family wild card. 3 jobs in 4 years, 1 DUI, 0 accountability. Suddenly he's VP of People and Partnerships. No announcement, no qualifications, just there. And every time I passed him in the hall, he looked away. But it was Ken Patel, our junior financial analyst, and who finally said it out loud. He pulled me into the break room one evening. His hands were shaking a little as he poured coffee. "I shouldn't be saying this," he whispered. "But they're building a case, man. You're the last domino." I just stared at him. "A case?" Ken nodded, glanced toward the cameras. "Misappropriation. Lapses in oversight. Stuff no one cared about 6 months ago. They're pulling receipts, Ethan." Quietly. That's when it hit me. They weren't just replacing me. They were erasing me, destroying the story of how we got here, replacing it with a cleaner version, one that started with Sophia and ended with Gregory's perfect legacy. I walked out of that break room and sat in my car for an hour. Didn't even turn the engine on. The humiliation burned, not just because they betrayed me, but because I didn't see it sooner. Rachel was right. Greg never saw me as a partner. I was a tool, a long-term rental, and now I'd outlived my usefulness. I thought about confronting them again. Thought about quitting loudly, exposing them in front of the board, torching it all on the way out. But then, a colder thought settled in. You don't destroy people like them by shouting. You destroy them by taking what they value most. Quietly, slowly, from the inside. Let them think they've won. Let them drink champagne and take their victory laps. Meanwhile, I'd start building the one thing they couldn't see coming. A plan. You don't slap a lion and walk away. You bleed. Slowly. That's what Gregory and Sophia didn't understand. They thought betrayal ended in the boardroom. They thought I'd go home, lick my wounds, maybe write a bitter LinkedIn post and disappear. They had no idea I'd been here before. Not at this scale, maybe, but enough to know. Revenge isn't rage, it's patience. It starts quiet. That weekend I bought a burner phone, registered a clean slate Gmail, leased a small office space in a co-working loft 2 blocks from my old building. Funny, I used to look down on places like that. Now it felt like the perfect ghost nest. I didn't even tell Rachel at first, not until I'd mapped everything out. On a legal pad, I drew 4 columns: people, leverage, weakness, risk. Then I circled one name: Travis Langford, Gregory's son. The weakest link, the fastest mouth. He was my first move. I'd sat on that data for years, ignored it, buried it. But I remembered every flag: misfiled receipts, inflated spending reports, a conference trip to Miami that mysteriously aligned with a friend's bachelor party. I knew where the skeletons were buried, because I used to clean the bones. I reached out to an old contact from our second funding round, a forensic accountant who owed me a favor. Within a week, I had a quietly compiled PDF of Langford Global Executive Expense Irregularities, flagged in red, mostly tied to Travis, some to Gregory, none to me. I encrypted it, backed it up twice. Didn't send it anywhere. Not yet. Then I texted Ken Patel. He replied instantly. We met in a half-empty Vietnamese cafe near the river. He looked nervous, kept tapping his spoon against his bowl. I shouldn't be here, he muttered. I leaned in and said quietly, "Then, tell me why you came anyway." He paused, then reached into his laptop bag and handed me a USB. "There's a pitch deck," he said. "One they showed to investors 2 weeks ago. Sophia claimed 12% quarter-over-quarter growth, but I ran the real numbers. We're down 4.2%. I didn't say anything," he added. "She's fabricating traction, glossing over churn, padding forecasts." "And Gregory knows?" I asked. Ken nodded. "They coached it together, said it was confidence-driven positioning. I didn't sign off, but they're using my name on the sheets." I tapped the table. "This stays between us, Ken. No digital trail. You leak nothing else, I'll handle the rest." He stared at me. "What are you doing, Ethan?" I smiled faintly. "Building something better." 2 weeks later, I quietly registered Orion Forge Labs, a boutique innovation firm with a vague tagline and a dummy website. Publicly, it looked like a think tank. Privately, it was bait, the kind that lures the best minds looking for real leadership, not office politics. I didn't poach directly. That would have been obvious. Instead, I posted a single job opening on a design forum under a pseudonym. Week later, someone applied. Emily Reed, Langford's brightest intern. Quiet, observant, gifted. I'd mentored her once during a sprint workshop. Showed her how to streamline an API call using a 9-line function instead of a 3-page mess. She messaged me personally, said she heard I was working on something. I brought her in on a trial basis. She showed up early, stayed late, took notes like every word might save her life. She reminded me of me, before the suits, before the smirks, and then came the big one, Eloise Warner. We hadn't spoken in years. She was a mid-level investor from our Series A days, elderly, fierce, and blunt enough to make grown men cry. When our first product launch tanked in year 2, she lost almost everything. I worked with her directly for weeks to get partial returns. Even wrote a personal letter of apology. She said she never forgot that. So when I emailed her using my new alias, she replied within the hour. "I knew they'd come for you eventually," she said over the phone. "Gregory plays kingmaker until someone threatens the crown." I told her what I was building. She didn't hesitate. "I'll vote against him," she said. "Just say the word." 3 board seats. That's all I needed. With her, I had one. 2 more. And the house would tremble. Meanwhile, I called in Sanjay Rao, tech consultant, privacy genius, former hacker with a white hat and a caffeine addiction. Gave him a job, dig quietly, find the backdoors I left in Langford's infrastructure, plant a digital dead man switch, something undeniable. He called me 3 days later. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. "Absolutely." I found a backup file on their old servers. Weekly data log from the pre-migration days. Buried deep. Guess what's in it? Tell me. Encrypted exchanges. Dates align with a stock bump before your Series D. Insider trading? Looks like it. Perfect. We met twice in a shared workspace with no cameras. I never Wrote anything down. Everything was stored offline, triple-backed and locked behind 2 air gaps. The beauty of revenge is not its speed, its precision. Every move I made came from patience, not anger. Every leak, every whisper, every silent resignation from Langford Global came from the slow rot I'd planted inside. And Sophia? She was too busy polishing her public image and taking podcasts, doing PR panels on visionary leadership, to realize her own team was slipping through her fingers. Marla stopped returning her texts. Derek quietly asked for early retirement. Even Victor Hahn forwarded one of my blog posts on LinkedIn with a cryptic caption, "Real leaders don't silence the ones who built them." Meanwhile, Emily's weekly report showed a steady stream of Langford engineers checking out Orion Forge's GitHub activity. I wasn't even hiding. I was waiting. One afternoon, Emily walked into my office holding a file folder. "They're trying to bury Ken," she said, claiming he falsified financials. I opened the folder. Internal HR memo. Legal threats. I nodded. "Tell Ken to take a vacation. Paid. I'll cover it." She looked at me. "And then?" I smiled. "And then we take the crown." It's strange how the same room that once celebrated you can be the one that watches you burn. Langford Global's shareholder meeting was supposed to be routine. Gregory wore his navy suit, the one with the stitched initials in the cuff. Sophia sat 2 seats down, pretending she wasn't nervously scrolling her phone. Travis, of course, wasn't invited. But his fingerprints were already on everything that mattered, and me? I wasn't on the list. But Eloise Warner made sure my name was on one chair, front row. The moment I walked in, Gregory's face locked into something between disbelief and panic. He leaned over to Sophia, whispered something fast. She didn't blink. He stepped to the podium, cleared his throat, and launched into a performance. Today marks a new chapter for Langford Global. He talked about vision, innovation, future-proofing, words, polished, empty words, and then the lights dimmed. The screen behind him flickered. One of the junior analysts hit play, and suddenly, the room heard Sophia's voice. Clear, cocky, cold. I told Travis, "Daddy has no idea how deep we buried those paper trails. Even if someone looks, they'd drown in audit fog." Travis snorted on the tape. "Please. Even the board can't trace those Cayman transfers. We built it tight." The room went dead silent. Gregory froze. Someone whispered, "Is that real?" And then, the screen changed again. Slide by slide, evidence lit up. Fraudulent vendor chains, offshore payments tied to personal luxury accounts, a fake marketing firm in Florida, traced straight to Travis, each slide more damning than the last. Then came the emails. Sophia authorizing inflated user metrics. Gregory CC'd. No denials, I didn't need to say a word. But I stood up anyway. Calm, steady, no rage, no theatrics. I looked straight at Gregory. "You built a kingdom of mirrors," I said, voice low, and forgot who lit the first flame. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Linda Cho stood. She didn't even look at him, she just said, "Effective immediately, I resign." Then walked out. The room erupted. Voices clashed. Investors shouted for answers. A few started live streaming. Real-time collapse. Gregory tried to regain control. Slander. This is a hack. Fabricated data. But Eloise stood and just said, "No. It's truth." And that was it. The vote came fast. Gregory, removed. Sophia stepped down quietly within the hour. The Langford name, severed from its own company. Travis? Vanished. Rumor is he fled the country before the subpoenas hit. SEC opened formal investigations within days. Investors fled like rats off a burning ship. And me? I didn't take a title, didn't reclaim a seat. I walked out the same way I walked in, head high. No need to gloat, no need to explain. They fired me in silence. I answered in public. The park is quiet this morning. There's a breeze. Just enough to stir the leaves, but not enough to move anything. That matters. I sit on the same bench I used to bring investor decks to, back when I still believed in every line of them. Coffee in hand, watching. Across the lawn, Emily sits under a tree with her team, laughing, sketching prototypes on her tablet like they're painting the future. That used to be me. I thought I'd missed the spotlight. But what I missed was the honesty. The nights when building something meant purpose, not politics. The mornings when loyalty wasn't a liability. Before people like Gregory taught me what power does to a man who thinks he owns everything. They taught me loyalty was weakness. I taught them legacy is earned. Rachel sits beside me, no words, just her familiar smile. She always knew, saw what I didn't. And maybe that's what peace really is. Not the silence after the storm, but knowing the storm didn't drown. You saw it revealed who you are. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to stand, and now it does, taller than any tower they ever built.